like you said, it's not to like crush anyone's dream and say you can't do this. But when you start to like realize what it is you're good at and what it is you can become better at, you can't do all the things at the same time. I think once you come to that realization, that's when your art is going to start being better.
It's Wednesday morning. We're kicking butt here at the Pencil Kings podcast. I hope you're having an awesome day. And right now, we're talking to Morten Jaeger. He's done a lot of different things, and he's also running his own tutorial site, which I just found out, which is really awesome. Morten, why don't you give people sort of like the 1 minute overview of who you are and what you do and what kind of artwork you're creating?
All right. So yeah, my name is Morten. At the moment, I work in the visual effects industry in London, working on films, Hollywood films, all that kind of fun stuff. In my free time, I create character work, 3D character work, anything from like realistic portraits to sort of like my style varies from realistic to very wacky stuff. So I guess that's sort of like the thing I do. A lot of it's recently been very focused on portraits and faces and studying a lot of that. But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. You said you do really wacky work and really realistic work. And I just took another look at your Showreel before we hopped on the call here. The thing that hit me first was the music choice that you use. Because usually there's like these dubstep, hardcore techno things. But you chose this very beautiful, light piece. But then as it continued on, it started to pick up like extra sounds. And it sort of had... don't want to say it was like a Nine Inch Nails quality, but there was these thumping sounds that just came in kind of out of nowhere. I was like, oh man, this is a really interesting track. What was the thought? Did you look at a lot before you chose that one, or did you just hear it once and it's like, yeah, this is the thing?
No, like usually with showreels, it's like you pull up some cool showreel or whatever from a nice studio, and they'll have something insane on there where it's just super epic. But I didn't really want people to watch my reel and be like, oh man, this is ridiculous. No, the piano music was just, I thought it was very calm, very relaxing, and it was something I enjoyed. So if people also enjoyed it, I thought that would be cool.
Awesome. I think it's actually really important. There was a piece that I did in university, and my animation wasn't that great or anything, but it was this track that really unified everything and made it click together and would allow people to sit through this really amateur hour student animation that I did. I think it's something that's definitely worth a lot of thought in an area where people don't think they can stand out, but it could be the thing that ends up getting your reel looked at twice.
Yeah, and I really enjoy listening to whatever music people usually put on their reel, because it's just, you get in. That's also another way to get introduced to new music.
I remember looking at animation reels, and I always listened to the music, throw my headphones on when I was hiring people and looking at portfolios and stuff. So let's go into this kind of wacky and kind of realistic thing. How do you find the balance? And I guess, did you get started with realistic? Did you get started with wacky? What was it like in the beginning for you when you decided, like, I want to be a digital artist. I'm going to get serious about this. What was the path that you took?
The first thing that sort of got me into 3D was The Incredibles, Pixar's film, and that was in like 2005, I think. So I started looking into that. I found an interview with one of the artists on the film. He mentioned that he started out using 3D Studio Max. So got myself a trial copy of 3D Studio Max. And in the beginning, I actually wanted to do animation. Quickly figured out that I really didn't want to do animation. So I started doing modeling and stuff as well. For the first couple of years, I only did architectural visualization and product shots and cars and like mostly hard surface, non-character stuff. The character scene in Denmark is almost non-existent. There's a lot of like architectural visualization. That's what I started working on. I think after about 3 or 4 years, I found this school that we have in Denmark called the Animation Workshop. I saw there was a lot of character stuff, a lot of animation. And then slowly my interest in characters sort of started to grow. And I started getting more into that.
One of the things that I notice about the pictures on your gallery here is that there's a lot of interesting color choices, and especially with the 3D things, there's really nice lighting. I've been out of the industry for a while, and it seems like people have kind of figured out lighting, but is it something that you feel, because you started in architectural visualizations, that you really have an eye for it? Because I know lighting is so important with that, to be able to visualize a room and how is it going to look when the sun is coming in and bouncing around everywhere. Do you think that was gave you a great foundation for lighting that you then, when you started doing character stuff, it just came really naturally? Or do you think it wasn't a part of what you're doing at all?
I never thought about it like that before, but it might be, because I also did a lot of product shots. That was both 3D and real world stuff. So, photography. When you do that kind of stuff, you sort of naturally develop this library in your head. What would a good composition look like? What's a nice kind of light setup for this situation? So I guess that sort of makes sense. So yeah, probably.
Cool. So you were working, right? Like you were a working artist doing the architectural visualization?
Yeah. I started working in 3D when I was about 16, I think. I did some freelance stuff. And then while I was in high school, I started working for a company after school, 7 or 8 hours a week. I would come in, help them with modeling some stuff or rendering some stuff out, doing some lighting for things. And that was my first sort of real world introduction to working in the world of 3D.
Awesome. And I got to dive in deeper here, because a lot of people have this question about getting started and the after school thing. How did that come about? What's the story behind that?
Well, I don't know if it's going to be that relevant for other people, but it actually got it through my mom.
Hey, it counts. Families, I got one of my first breaks through my dad. He met somebody who did digital art, and he's like, hey, you guys do digital art. You should check out my son. All he does is digital art. Like he loves this stuff.
Well, actually, it's like my dad was the one who, because in Denmark, when you're in the 9th grade, you have, it's like an internship placement for about 2 weeks, I think, where you go to a company, you see how real people work when you're not in school. And at the time, I played golf, and I just wanted to go to the golf store or whatever and just sell golf clubs.
Okay.
And my dad was like, no. He knew I did the 3D stuff and all that kind of things. And he was like, no, there's an advertisement company just down the road. You're going to go there instead. And I was like, okay, whatever, I'll go there. And I ended up really liking it. And that's really what got me really into 3D. About a year after that, my mom, she talked with a friend of hers. He was like, yeah, we're doing this website thing with some 3D stuff. I'm like, oh, my son does 3D. You should take a look at what he does. So it was kind of the same as with your dad, I suppose. They took a look at my stuff and they got me in for an interview, and then I started working a little bit for them.
Do you remember what you did as a test or what you showed to them for that first job?
Yeah, it was like a 3D version of their logo. Something really, really simple. And they were so impressed because it was 3D. And at the time, 3D wasn't really, that common to see for like normal people, I suppose.
I love that. A lot of people build up what they have to do to get their first job in their heads as some kind of like epic journey. It's like, to get your first job, you have to go through like a Lord of the Rings experience for your art to get there. And it's just simply not true. I remember for me, I think it was probably just planets in space. And like just so simple, spheres with a star background. And then they gave me a sound clip and they're like, here, animate something wacky with this. And so I made this like talking horse and a crab, and they were having a conversation, and they're like, yep, okay, good enough. Like we can work with this. And it's not, you don't have to go to Mordor and get the ring from Sauron to move forward with your art.
I have something more. Something none of your dry as dust professors and routine-ridden doctors have. Love, devotion, passion.
I feel like you were lucky that you had this internship program. But what do you think people could do if they don't have an internship program in their class? Do you think people could just like ask their teacher, I really want to do this graphics thing. We're not doing any stuff like this in school. I found a company. Would it be cool if I put together my own internship? Do you think that would fly for people? Or
So I guess that's really dependent on the school. That's interesting. I mean, I guess if you make your case.
Yeah, I feel like there's the real rules, and then there's the limiting rules that we create in our head. Like you need this most awesome portfolio to even talk to anybody. But then there's like, you can just totally break the rules and create whatever you want,
Especially like with the VFX industry now, companies are getting really good at setting up, annual internship programs, mostly for graduates though. But, if your stuff is good enough, then, they'll take you in as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it was great that you started with architectural visualization and you had some kind of foundation because again, I see a lot of people asking questions and it's all revolves around creating characters. Like I don't want to discourage anybody from having big dreams. No. I just feel like it's such a hard thing to do. There's so much competition because that's what everybody says there's only usually like one hero character. I guess in The Incredibles, there's four of them, 4 main characters and 1 villain. But usually it's just like one guy has that job. And meanwhile, there's, 100 or maybe even 200 other artists working on the same project. I would personally like to hedge my bets and say, I'm going to be an environment artist and I'm going to be awesome at that and get noticed that way. But for you, I think it's awesome that you had the foundation of being in architectural visualization. But then how did you make the transition to be doing more character work? Because most of your work on your website now is character based.
Yeah. Well, we had a couple people on some 3D forums in Denmark that started to do some character stuff. And, they started out in ZBrush. And then other people, including me, sort of caught on to ZBrush and were like, okay, that's cool. I want to explore some more of that. A lot of the stuff on ZBrush Central at the time was wacky experimental characters. So that sort of inspired me. An important thing to keep in mind is that I sort of realized maybe a year or 2 ago is that I am not going to be the best character designer. I'd love to be the best character designer and then just, do 3D stuff of my own characters. But that's not what I do. I don't really have the time to just sit down and only draw and concept characters. Like you said, it's not to like crush anyone's dream and say, you can't do this. But when you start to like realize what it is you're good at and what it is you can become better at, you can't do all the things at the same time. I think once you come to that realization, that's when your art is going to start being better. And for me, it's like, well, my characters might not be the most interesting. They might not be the best out there, but if that's the case, maybe I'll just take someone else's concept and do some 3D of that. I think that's important for people to keep in mind, at least.
Oh, very cool. So are you actually collaborating with people that while you're browsing forums, you see somebody's concept that really like excites you and then you just contact them and say, hey, would you mind if I turn this into the full 3D thing?
Yeah, that's I have a character I'm working on now where it was actually a friend of mine who designed it, and I just saw a sketch of his on his blog and I was like, hey, dude, can I do a 3D version of this? And he was like, yeah, that would be super cool. And usually people really take well to that, because if they're like 2D people, they only draw, they're not going to make it in 3D. And if someone comes to them and say, I really like your art, can I do a 3D piece of it? Most people are going to be like, yeah, that would be amazing.
That is so cool. I'd never thought about that. I mean, we're all looking to get noticed and we're all trying to get exposure, and we never know where this is going to lead, of course. But the fact that you're taking someone's existing concept and then creating a new artwork from that, then you can say, hey, if you like this design of this character, you can check out my friend's blog over here. And then him similarly, it's like, if you'd like to see what this concept looks like in 3D, you can check out my friend's blog over here. And all of a sudden it's like you've multiplied the power, because people that would never see his blog are being able to transition through that. That's wicked.
Exactly. And if you really think about it, that's how the real world works. Like in animation, you're never the person who sits down, draws the character sheets, does the character design, then goes on to animate it, then goes on to like render it or whatever. It's always like, you have your task. Unless you're like a 1 or 2 man studio, that's going to be really hard to find.
I always thought that was the gig, though. You had to be awesome at everything. Just learn everything. Forget about having friends, or don't ever think about having a kid, and definitely don't get married, because you've got no time, man. You've got to just
be the best.
keep sharpening those skills. But the reality isn't that at all.
I think it. I breathe it. Look out at the rain. Where you, where anybody sees only a drop of water rolling down the window, I see a universe of beings animated with all the passions common to physical life.
I see the character work on your website, and then you were just saying how that's not a lot of what you do in your actual job. What do you do?
In my actual job, I do none of these things that you see on my website. Most of the time it's environments. It's realistic stuff, because you gotta make some set extension for whatever film. I had some stuff from Pacific Rim in my showreel, if you remember. That was just the buildings in the background. We needed a set extension for Hong Kong it was supposed to take place in or something, so we just built a crap ton of buildings, filled it with detail, and then send it off to texturing. Then someone else lit it and rendered it. That kind of stuff.
What does set extension mean? Again, hitting on this thing about these misconceptions that I see people having again and again. Like, I want to try and expose people listening to this that, you think you want to be the character designer on the Disney film, but there's so many other jobs that you can do, but there's not like a book of these different jobs where you can just look through and see. I feel like part of it is because the industry changes and technology improves. And so people just don't know this. They think that, I'm an animator or I'm a character designer. It just stops there.
Yeah.
Like or I'm a concept artist.
Yeah.
So that there's like these three main jobs that people can focus on. But in actuality, there's like hundreds of different job titles and different things that people do. So can you explain set extension a little bit? And is that like a full-time gig for somebody?
Well, set extension is a part of a bunch of disciplines. My actual job title is modeler. So a 3D modeler. I model characters, creatures, and environments, whatever the job needs. In terms of set extension, you get a plate from a client and...
Wait. Hold on. You get a plate, like a dinner plate?
No.
Or what?
A plate meaning a shot.
A shot. Okay. I'm just being stupid, but I just wanted to clarify.
It's good. So everyone understands. So we get a shot from a client. Let's say it's for the Pirates of the Caribbean, right? So we have Johnny Depp on a green screen and he's just acting out whatever he's going to act out. That stuff then gets sent to tracking, which then tracks everything in the scene and preps it for putting the real world shot into 3D. And then we start modeling all the background stuff. Let's say he's on a ship. We modeled the pirate ship. And because that's a 3D model, we replace all the green screen with the 3D asset. So that's going to be the set extension.
Gotcha. And just to clarify, when you said tracking, I mean, they'll have a real camera that's filming Johnny Depp and maybe moving around, but then somebody takes that information and creates a virtual camera so that you can then recreate the whole scene with the camera in the computers. And so you know exactly where you need to put everything and how everything kind of fits together and looks.
There's a lot of work that goes into actually producing a film, and a lot of the stuff people like the tracking or comping stuff, that's just stuff people never see, so they don't realize. A couple of years ago, there was this showreel released from, I think, Pixelmundo, the guys who do most of the stuff for Game of Thrones. Mm-hmm. And it was basically just a compositing reel, where you put stuff in to fill out the background. And you saw how much stuff was actually added. You have a battlefield with like 3 or 4 tents, and then in compositing, they just add 300 more tents, so you don't have to shoot 300 tents. They replace the sky with a sunny sky if it's like overcast or something, and this stuff happens all the time, this sort of invisible stuff to make everything look better.
We're really in this amazing period of filmmaking where we're only really limited by creativity. One of the ones I saw recently was Mad Max. It's definitely one of my most favorite films from a visual design standpoint, of just how much detail went into so many different things in that movie. Yeah. And it's a very fairly simplistic movie, guys in cars driving through the desert. There's no real spoiler alert here, but just like there was one scene where they showed the roof of this buggy, and it was all like this, I forget what the word is, but it's like this embossed foil with skulls on it. I was just like, man, somebody thought of that. Somebody like took the time to think, what is the roof of this going to look like in this universe? And there's never any explanation how these people with limited resources get all this cool gear, but it's like, who cares? It just looks amazing, and I love it.
Yeah, like that film was so well thought out. The art direction of that film was just impeccable. It was really well done.
So let's now transition a little bit to, I'm not sure if it's a side project, but it definitely looks very polished. Everything that you do looks very polished, and I'm really impressed. But a website called Flip Normals. Yes. And I believe it's quite similar to Pencil Kings in some regards. It's just all about sharing knowledge and trying to expose people to higher level education. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about Flip Normals from your standpoint, and then I'll see if I have any questions come up along the way.
Well, Flip Normals, I started with a friend of mine. His name is Henning Sanden. He's also a 3D artist, and we do pretty much the same thing. And we thought to ourselves that there's a lot of good 3D stuff out there, tutorials on how to get started, but a lot of the quality was maybe not like up to scratch all the time. So we wanted to focus on creating a lot of good free content in the beginning that people could sort of like a way for people to get started with 3D. So we started with our introduction to 3D that just covers everything. What is modeling? What is concept art? What is lighting? What is rendering? All that kind of stuff. Like you say, it is a side project, but like right now it could totally be a full-time thing because a lot of time goes into the tutorials. We recently released our first paid tutorial as well. Starting to venture into like the paid market has taken a lot of our time because we don't really just want to put together something kind of okay. Like, it has to be high quality. It has to look good. It has to be polished. So I think a lot of our content there reflects on that.
It really does look amazing, and I think you should be really proud of what you've made. It's very cool.
Like I mentioned before, whether you want to get into, visual effects, or if it's animation, feature film, let's say you want to go to Pixar or Disney, or you want to go over here in London and work for one of the big companies over here, you're never going to know everything. There are generalists who know lots of things about a lot of subjects, but they don't really have time to specialize. Not saying that they're not good. I mean, they might be really great at what they're doing, but focus your efforts on what you like to do. If it's environments, focus on some environment stuff. I mean, of course, branch out and experiment with other things as well, but just realize that there's one profession, and that's really what's needed most of the time. If you go to smaller studios, then it's amazing that you can do other things, explore other areas as well, but think about what it is you like to do, and I think you should really just pursue that.
Great advice. One thing that I would add to that is that there are smaller studios that are easier to get into or that are local to you, that's not London or LA or whatever. Yeah. These studios are great because it gives you an opportunity to be a generalist and kind of learn what you like, because when you're a student or if you're just studying at home, you might not actually understand what being an animator is really all about. No. And then you go and you work somewhere and you realize what it actually is. For example, let's take animation. There's a lot of motion capture that happens now where they take real actors and they track how they move and then they import that into the computer. Now, I've met animators, they don't even feel like they're really animating anymore. They're just, I don't even know what you would call that. When you say animation to somebody that's not familiar with this, they believe it's making cartoon characters and stuff like this, but that's not actually the case in a lot of instances.
That does happen a lot now.
Yeah, which I think is fine. I'm very happy with the quality of animation that I'm seeing in films and everything. Yeah. But at a smaller studio, even though it may not have the prestige or it might not have the blockbuster movie or game that you're working on, but you have an opportunity to learn what you're good at or what you enjoy. And I think that's really beneficial. And you have a chance to kind of jump around because at the small studio, there's always different projects and different requirements. And if you say, hey, camera tracking seems really interesting to me, instead of trying to go through tutorials and stuff, you get to sit beside the guy who's the master. Yeah. And then in 3 months, you're maybe not a master, but you're pretty darn good. And it's another skill that you can take, and it's another discipline that you can say, hey, I really like tracking. I mean, as smaller studios are great for this.
Yeah, so usually you get a lot of freedom in a smaller studio. Like you say, there are opportunities to jump around and try different disciplines.
All right. So Morten, why don't you let people know where they can find you online, and then I'll wrap this up.
Yeah, I guess you can find my stuff on mortenjaeger.com. That's my personal website, my gallery. Otherwise, look out for my online tag, which is MJ the Hunter. It's on ArtStation, CG Society, all those websites. So, yeah.
And I'll just also mention your Flipped Normals site, which I had spelt it wrong. When I first heard it, I thought it was Flip Normals, but it's actually flipped with the ED. Yes. So it's FLIPPEDNORMALS.com. Exactly. And if you want one place that's easy to find everything, we'll have links to different things that we've mentioned, as well as a description and whatnot on the Pencil Kings website. So that'll be pencilkings.com/Morten Jaeger. And so that will be MORTEN JAEGER.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Morten, for sharing your insights. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was really nice. Thank you.
Keep in touch. At Pencil Kings, we kind of capped things at doing just traditional drawing and digital painting, and we thought that tackling 3D was just another mountain, and there's just too much stuff to cover.
Yeah, there's a lot.
But Morten's site, Flip Normals, looks like it's got a lot of cool stuff. So if you're into 3D, definitely give it a shot.
Yeah, I'd say check out the introduction to 3D. It's free completely. You can check out all the content, so take a look at that.
And I will see you, listener, next Wednesday for the next episode of the Pencil Kings podcast. So looking forward to that. Take care.
Demands patience, skill, years of practice.
Ah, you talk like a fool. I would trade a century of practice for an ounce of inspiration.
If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could hit the 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher Radio and leave us a little comment about what you thought about this.